Welcome to 90.1 FM KBPK. I'm here with the Dean of Fine Arts, Bob Jensen, a gentleman I've known for over 30 years. And Bob, I've sort of gone full circle. I've interviewed Gary Krinke, Tom Blank, Todd Glenn, and now you. I have the pleasure for myself of being with the gentleman that when we say theater arts department here at Fullerton, all four of you get mentioned at the same time. But I'm going to go back because most of us, when we talk about theater, look at a place that we start at. Of course, you're from New York. I got to ask you, we've known you as a grown-up, but where did you find this love for theater?
Well, I think any one of us is a product of so many influences. And I think the first one were my parents. Growing up in Brooklyn, New York, my parents encouraged me to be an artist. My mom really wanted me to be an architect. That didn't turn out to be the outcome. And because my dad loved opera and music, and then I went to concerts. Because my mother loved art, I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Museum of Modern Art. That was always part of my background. Because my dad loved history and my grandfather did, it meant that I went to the Morristown battlefields, Valley Forge, Gettysburg, sort of the northeastern battlefields, and then the American Revolution in Boston and Philadelphia. Part of my youth was always going to places and having my imagination filled purposely by my parents. So that was part of what was going on. It was first the way I was raised by my family to love the arts. I grew up near Princeton, New Jersey. Eventually, we moved from Brooklyn to Princeton. So grade school, junior high, high school was in central New Jersey. And being near Princeton meant being near McCarter Theater. And that was incredible because I got to see a Tony Award-winning regional theater do the classics and do contemporary plays and American classics, a whole variety of things. I mean, I loved Shakespeare from an early age because I saw professional actors do it so well that I could get over bad classes and bad readings. And what probably disengaged a lot of people, for me, it had already come to life because I went to McCarter Theater in Princeton. Simultaneously, in junior high school, I had the best teacher of my life, and that's with no disrespect to the rest of the great teachers, but Don Vikes, who I got to see this November, made learning so incredibly exciting. All the disciplines came into the classroom. He taught all our subjects in 8th grade, and then 9th grade. I had different science and math teachers, but I was with them all day long. And learning was this tremendous adventure where you took great risks. You went out and you researched things, and then you were content producers. You weren't just regurgitating things. So that meant we built an electric map of Boston. We built ship models of the Pequod, and we did studies on whales and did charts and introductory oceanography when we read Moby Dick because we read the classics. And then he directed us in production. So I got to be Sir Toby Belch in Twelfth Night. I mean, I was the thinnest Sir Toby Belch. I wore pillows inside our costumes because we were pretty primitive with production values. And I got to play Macbeth, and the lines still come back to me. And those were very amateur little productions, but I just fell in love with doing theater as well as experiencing theater at McCarter Theater. So I had all those things going in my head, and I loved extra credit. And at one point in 8th grade, I found out that on PBS, which was KCET in New York, they had a program called The Age of Kings. And so that was all Shakespeare's history plays done by the Royal Shakespeare Company. So every Friday night I got to watch them, and I started reading Shakespeare. And so, all those things coming together made this really elevated form of communication called Shakespearean theater very accessible to me, very interesting. So history and literature and art, kind of the confluence of all those things in my imagination as a kid were really, really fantastic influences. It was something to do and something to love. Sometimes I get the formula backwards, to do Shakespeare is to love Shakespeare. Well, you got to know Shakespeare to do Shakespeare to love Shakespeare. But, I would work out those pieces of the formula. I remember having lines cut from Twelfth Night, and I went to Don Vikes and I asked him, what I had done wrong while he was cutting some of my lines, and he explained that he asked me if I knew what I was saying. It never occurred to me that I actually needed to know what those words meant, and he explained that I was referencing threatening to urinate on someone's head. I didn't even know that's what I was saying, and so those lines were cut for the play. So I loved that in junior high. I didn't do theater in high school, surprisingly. I got much more involved in some other parts of high school life, that I loved. But it was later, in grad school where it rekindled itself in a really profound way that created a click going off in my head and a career course that I followed.
When we think about you, of course, you talk about these people that meant so much to you in your life. If it wasn't for the beautiful woman you're married to, you might have stayed back in that area because, as the story goes, she had family out in California, and the reason you came out to California was because of a visit. Or you might have stayed on the East Coast, and I'd have somebody else sitting in that chair right now except you. So, really, you got drug out here because of your wife, not because you were necessarily looking for a career change.
True. I had an amazing 5 years that I just described to you. That was incredible. The people, the opportunities. There was a point later where the state of California was arguing with me about a claim I was making for the work I did back east, and they said it was physically impossible to accomplish what I did in those 5 years, that somehow I was misrepresenting it. And it was just all these opportunities that came. And then the kids from the high school would come along with me and do the summer stock theater and that. So, I just, like everything else in my life, I've just been surrounded by people, these communities of people that permit me to join them. And the other is Sandy's family. From the moment we were first dating, and I looked at this incredible family, a tightly love-knit group of people, whose love for each other is reinforced by their faith in a way that is very winsome. And so being a part of that, coming out on vacations and visiting and knowing that Sandy really missed them 3,000 miles away, they had come to California a few years before we did. I was reading a book called What Color is Your Parachute? I'm 30 years old. It says you should make some bold moves. Mm-hmm. Sandy and I are discussing the book on the beach at Newport Beach one day with a family and I was just telling her about what I was reading about. And we lighted upon this idea from the book that I should go out and just do inquiry interviews, not actual job interviews, but just find out what it would be like to teach in Southern California, to work in Southern California. And those led to some leads, actually. And one of them was with Disney, and I got encouraged by people at Disneyland that were looking for Imagineers. So I put that together with an incredibly close-knit, loving family. And it's not to say that my family wasn't that, but Sandy has 4 brothers, 3 of whom live in Southern California, and her mom and her dad, and then extended family that came after the family came out here. And so I was into this community of a family, Southern California family, and then we just decided that, Sandy and I, that when Disney encouraged me to come back in November, and this was August, we said, why wait? Why not just make a move? I didn't know that these inquiry interviews actually led to job offers. I had 2 teaching job offers in high school, which wasn't really my goal, but was my way to get here and put a foothold in Southern California. And then I had hoped that by November the Disney offer was going to be mine, and that's presumptuous of me to think that. And as it turned out, the offer wasn't promising. I realized there was a gap between what an Imagineer was and what skill sets I had prepared at that point. At least that's what I said to myself. But we had already had forward momentum, so Sandy and Garrett, our first child, came out, and we got connected here, to family and the city of Fullerton and a high school teaching job that the people were very kind to me to give me that job. But that wasn't really where my heart was, because I was waiting for that Disney thing. So Sandy comes in December. By January, she's taking a class at Fullerton College, a gallery design class, extending her interests that began at NYU when she was studying there. And Lynn Gamwell, the teacher, said there was an opening in the theater department. Gave me the name of Jim Henderson, who was the outgoing theater professor that you know well, a beautiful, beautiful man. I spent 45 minutes on the phone with him, and he gave me such encouragement that started a friendship that I treasure also. It was Jim that taught me enough about who was interviewing me, what they were interested in, the fact they didn't completely agree with each other about what the department needed. And then, the rest was going through a pretty rigorous interview process, admitting what I didn't know, because clearly I wasn't, I'm sure I didn't have the credentials of some of the other people I was competing with, but those 4 people in that interview group saw enough in me that they wanted to take a risk on me. And I think so much of my life is people risking something to work with me. And So it's a long version. I'm sorry, Mark, of how,
Oh,
how
that's
we got
okay.
out
No,
here.
no.
But I want to talk about Sandy for a moment, if I can. And it's bittersweet in a way, because she is the most beautiful force in my life, every day of my life, and is an extraordinary mother and now grandmother in all the ways that people write about women being exceptional. I joke about the fact that every man is some woman's reformation project, and I would admit that she's not finished with me. But the bittersweet part is to accomplish everything I've accomplished in my professional life has meant that the price has been dear for her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really look forward to the next couple of years, not fixing all that, just really saying, right in front of me now are what I hope are 10 years, if I'm granted that, of good health and good energy to invest in our relationship as Sandy prepares to retire in a year. I don't deserve Sandy, but I am so blessed to have her in my life. And our walk with God together, our morning devotionals, our involvement in missions together overseas and locally, all just confirm the fact that here's another extraordinary influence in my life, my life partner that I love so much. And to see the grandkids run to her, to see my children hold on to her, it just keeps reminding me how extraordinarily blessed. And you got to imagine, before she agreed to marry me, or as she agreed to marry me, my friends from college met with her to warn her and question whether she was making a good choice. So, it hasn't been, there are no guarantees in being a part of my life, but being a part of her life has made all the difference. All the difference, completely all the difference. Trumps all the other stories about influences, her influence. And I'm not just saying that, I feel that deeply. Whether I live that out every day is my challenge that I have to acknowledge I haven't, hence bittersweet about that.
Well, Bob, when you think about your wife, I think what happens is everybody will see Bob Jensen on campus and they go, look how dedicated Bob is. Bob's here every day. Bob's here on the weekends. Nobody ever thinks about the person who's at home that is supporting you, backing you, and I mean this with a great deal of love, allowing you to pursue your dreams, your wishes, and your desires, and giving up of themselves. And many times you get the accolades and you get the awards, and everybody will say, Bob, God, look what you did. And your wife stands there like she will be at your retirement dinner, and nobody turns around and looks at her and says, thank you for giving up the tens of thousands of hours that you could have been with your husband to us, to allow us to use him, and for him not to necessarily be there with you for all times. I mean, I just sometimes think that family members are forgotten along the way, and people should turn around and look at the family members every once in a while and say, thank you for what you've done for Fullerton College, because if it wasn't for you, Bob couldn't have been here. And, I know how much you love your family and your kids and everything else. You talked about you talking to Jim Henderson, and so, of course, I talked about the other three gentlemen you worked a great deal of your career with. I'm not sure how the pecking order went, if it was Todd, then you, then Gary, then Tom, how everybody got hired. I know Jim was still here, a great man. But I've got to ask, because I've talked to everybody else about that love, hate, respect, desire situation, because you were four creative minds. I think Fullerton College was very blessed to get four young men who loved theater so much and had an open mind about theater as they did during that time. So little time about spending it with the three other guys that, I'll say you were all a little crazy to work with each other and to work sometimes maybe against each other and trying to get projects done. What was that like?
I'm probably most likely to use superlatives of anybody but it was extraordinary. It was. What was extraordinary, I think, was we had someone who had already established himself here, Todd Glenn, as our chairman. And with the retirements of his colleagues, it meant he got to pick his new team. So he had everything to do with, and the order was Gary Krinke, Tom Blank, and then Bob, and Pat Scribner, and within our office staff, Pat Scribner. So he got to build this whole team together in the early days of 1980-81. And he understood so many different things, not just about theater, but about campus life, about engagement in the life of the college, that he took us off on a retreat in our first month together, officially, my first semester. And we went off on to a cabin, and we discovered a couple things. We discovered that we actually liked each other, and that was a plus, that we really didn't want to screw up, that gave us opportunity for collaboration, and that we had to collaborate. We were going to have to collaborate. We saw a real need that we could serve. So it's community, we liked each other, and purpose. And what that purpose was is we defined one of the great challenges was the effect of Proposition 13 that limited arts funding in the grade schools and junior highs and high schools. We thought that was the biggest challenge. What could we do to write the course of arts education personally? What could we do that? Collectively, what could we do? And we define that, at least most immediately, as reaching down into the high schools and building friendships with the high school teachers. There wasn't an ulterior motive, but it was clear that those friendships could lead to some students coming to us.
Mm-hmm.
Someone once said to me they read a book that was done by actors about how to be a successful business person, and they said you have to act like you care. And the fellow came to me with this truth about, I just learned it. Now I get you guys. You act like you care. And I hated to correct him, but I said, no, you actually have to care.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just act like you care. So going back to that decision that weekend, we needed to build relationships, friendships with the high school drama teachers. One, because they were all alone.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, because they were suffering through budget cuts or the results of budget cuts from kids coming up to them that had no experience at all in the arts. And then three, what could we do to partner with them to help them be successful? What could we do in terms of supplementary activities like a high school matinee program, a summer musical conservatory, never to steal their kids? But in the same way I got to go to McCarter Theater, we hoped that the local high schools could come to Fullerton College and see the classics done well, or American classics. Less likely perhaps the contemporary plays. We kept trying to pick, in our fall classic, we called it, a show that would appeal to high school teachers. And then the creation of the High School Theater Festival came out of that weekend too. I mean, all the ideas just started percolating so quickly that weekend, because once we defined the problem and saw a purpose that our community could go into that community, then we said, well, what can we do? And we were very good at figuring out things to do. And we built a 10-year plan. And there were other issues besides the relationship to high schools. And of course, one of our charges is to move people on to universities. In other cases, it's moving through professional training people to employment. Others is general education kids who are just coming because no one else would have them, or they have to take this class, and to realize that that's the audience of the future. What can we do to cultivate a love and appreciation for theater while they're with us? So many of the programming that we came up with was in response to the definition of those purposes between us. And then Todd said some things that just frightened us to death that weekend, each one of us. One, he said, we're going to rotate the leadership of the program. It's not an original idea, but that was frightening to us. We couldn't imagine ourselves being Todd in the beginning. We looked up to this man from Yale who had been here and built the building I call the theater building, the house that Todd built. He said we're going to do that. So each one of us afterwards said that we did a calculation, mathematical calculation in a 3-year term of how soon we had to leave the college before we had to face that reality. So he built into the culture right away the fact that we were going to rotate leadership. Second, he told us that, and this was even more frightening, that we were going to do every side of production, each one of us, whether we were trained in that or not. We were going to wear different hats all the time. That meant Tom Blank did costuming for the second show, which fortunately was steam baths, so he was dealing with bathrobes and towels. That was not a difficult costuming choice. And of course, Mello was always around us doing beautiful work. And Gary is also a very gifted costumer. And Gary has a terrific design eye. So that also frightened that. Oh my goodness. In fact, when I was hired as a technical director / director, which is a somewhat unusual combination. And fortunately, I was enough of a generalist and had done both that I could do that. But I didn't have deep silo experience in both of those things. And so part of that time was Todd, an exquisite and elegant set designer and technical director with engineering capabilities far beyond my imagination. He invested time in me and an open door to come and talk through all the things that led to the long nights when I made mistakes and how I had to fix those mistakes. That was amazing. And Gary and Tom so encouraged me. They loved the fact that I could build scenery and recite poetry. They thought that was kind of an interesting mix, so we hit it off right away in the beginning. And that period of time lasted for about 6 or 7 years. And then I think Todd felt itchy about doing something else. And then an extraordinary part of his story is teaching himself computer graphics, working at the college on a leave of absence to really develop and hone his computer repair skills, and then created a computer graphics department here at the college that's sensational. Now it's our digital arts. So how can somebody do that? I mean, that's amazing. And he's the only one I know who has been the department chairman of 2 different programs. We took his own leadership skills into the art department. And that meant then we reassembled our team. And the core remained Tom, Bob, and Gary, but Mello won a full-time position. We're so thankful that happened. And we brought in a series of technical directors, and then the program has grown into its current set of really dynamic people. And one of the wonderful things I can say now with the team that's there is they really enjoy working with each other. I mean, that's perhaps the greatest satisfaction I take out of current. And I tell everyone this is a time of tremendous opportunity, because I remember back, you said, what was it like? It was a time of tremendous opportunity. The metaphor I used is railroad roundhouse, and all the trains were pulling out of the stations, and it wasn't just engines. There were, there was this encouragement for our students, hop aboard. We're going to do a children's theater program. We're going to do a high school conservatory. We're doing this thing called the High School Theater Festival. By the way, we're doing the matinees, and we needed you to greet the high school kids coming off the buses. And you were there, Mark. You know how wild and crazy that was. And it doesn't mean that we got everything right, but I think there was a permission within us all that people could make mistakes, and somebody was there to help pick you up if you needed it, if you wanted somebody to pick you up. A friend of mine that was at Oberlin College and a production manager with very creative people like the ones we got to work with said that his job was, to kind of keep out of their way and make sure they didn't burn down the building. And some of the times that's what happened. The student projects, sometimes I'd walk into the shop and wonder, what is this?
Yeah.
And I had to ask, what's going on? Have these people been trained on these tools? Who are these guys? That we had to create some sort of tethering mechanisms. And I hope we never killed the creative spirit that people had. And we made it up as we went along. Truly, we didn't know how some of these things were going to work out, and it's very gratifying to see that in 8 years we accomplished all but one part of our 10-year plan, and that was to create a semi-professional resident theater company. And by 1987 we did that. So it took us longer to get to that point. We investigated it. But when we finally did Theater on the Green at the Muckenthaler Cultural Arts Center for what became 4 different summers, 2 different stages of that, I feel good that we accomplished what we set out to do. And that goes back to Todd teaching us about strategic visioning. So exciting, opportunistic, extraordinary, all the energy and everything happening. But Todd kept reminding us to look beyond. And I think there were so many times in our life. So Todd would be the next mentor that I would cite. And I include Gary and Tom in this, but I remember Todd coming to me and saying, I needed to get involved in the faculty senate. And I thought, when? He said, you have to make time for it. I said, okay. And, at that point in my life, I did what Todd told me. I said, okay, Todd, I'll do that. And that meant I had to change my teaching schedule and get involved there. And before I went to the first meeting, he said, please remember, you're no longer the representative of the theater department. You're representing the fine arts division, and you're representing the college. So you got to start thinking globally. I want you to do this. Todd would grab me at times, and he still grabs me at times.
Yeah.
And said, "This is why. This is why you have to do this." And I think of so many things that happened after that in my professional life here is because Todd didn't persuade me. He told me what I was going to do, which was to get involved. And so things like. Any of the projects that followed that involved a buy-in from the rest of the campus, or their participation, or their interest, or their funding, came because he taught me to go out there and make friends, and create spheres of influence and activity that weren't just inside the walls of the theater building. That was a watershed kind of moment for me, because I thought all I was supposed to do was bury my life in that building. And there were times that Sandy came in the middle of the night with 2 children in her arms asking me what I was doing.
Yeah.
when I blew it, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well, and it goes back when you talk about Todd. It's funny. Last time I saw Todd was at Gary's retirement dinner. And we're talking, and I said, hey, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm carrying 16 units. And I looked at him and I go, you're carrying 16 units? Yeah, well, I want to learn these languages. And he was one of those, my sister was talking to him. She said something she wanted to do. And Todd looked at her and said, then go do it. Don't talk about it. Go do it. And that's really what the theater department was about too, that you were involved in, Bob. I mean, it was a group of men that treated it not as educational theater, even though it was. It was treated very much as the professional theater everybody wanted to step into. We were all held to a high standard of if you're going to say you're going to do something, you better do it. And because that's what you all did. And if there was times where I showed up, would visit with you, I found something in moving that you gave Ron Dickinson and I many years ago, which was a 600-hour award, that I can remember those days that I would show up. You would been here for 15 hours already, but there was still stuff we had to do. There was an attitude during that period of time that you made us all love theater. We loved it anyway, but we looked at these men that we were learning from, and we saw the love that you were giving. You weren't just there for a paycheck. You weren't there just because you could become the Dean of Fine Arts someday. You were there because of the love of what you were doing. And that love transferred to the students. And I think if all the students that went to Fullerton College have anything to say to all of you, it's thank you for showing what the love of theater and the love of arts is. Because that's what all four of you gave us. And I don't know if that came from you four or where you talk about it, if that was an accumulation of all the mentors that you had in your life that just got passed on to us. Is that what it was, or was it just the group when we think about it?
I think it was both things. We brought our life experiences into it, and they continued. The life experience of Tom and Gary involved doing additional projects outside the college, and then they would bring their students along. I made a decision that first year that I didn't know how I was going to do that time-wise, and there were some nice offers that were made to me, introductory offers, that would have been fun, but gosh, I needed to say no to something, and I didn't have a good governor on my time clock anyway, so that felt like at least I was saying no. And somebody said to me, I think the second year, what we love about you, Bob, is that you never say no. And I thought, oh my goodness, is that true? And a couple years later, one of the alums told his theater company, and we were always very proud of people going off and doing their own work, as you're describing. That's what we wanted to be. I call us a stagecoach stop on a life journey, and I don't mean you stop for 15 minutes. I mean you spend as many years with you as you need to, but to make sure there's the bigger picture of where you're headed, even if it hasn't coalesced yet. And so many students that I talk to, it's okay that the click hasn't gone off in their head. All they need to do is put themselves in continuing places of great opportunity, and it's going to come. They're going to find that giftedness. But one of them said, I teach my theater company, a guy that I love dearly, so I'm not being critical of him. He said, I need you to be as driven as Bob Jensen. So there was another one where it was meant as a compliment, but I said, driven? Oh my goodness, that means I'm not in control. And so I never wanted to be that. So I think it was our own life experiences. In the 80s, because of the losses I was experiencing that I wasn't being that conscious of, as Sandy came to faith, I went back into my faith and really looked at it in a rigorous kind of way. And I came to realize that I love theater as an art form, and I wanted to protect it, but actually it was an expression of the things that I valued most. And that doesn't mean it's a bully pulpit. Sometimes people can do that, and you do your political, polemical kind of plays, and you're beating up your audience. I never wanted it to be that, but it made me really think about what was most important. And so that was imperfectly sort of my dance. I love August Wilson talking about in Master Harold and the Boys that looking there at race relations, how ballroom dancing is this graceful experience where partners have to know each other. And I think we did a dance for a period of time that was very graceful, even though we were exhausted and sweaty and sawdust coming out of what hair I had at that point. There was this dance we did, and each one of us contributed something different, and it wasn't always pretty. And I don't want to make it into some perfect time. We struggled, and there were meetings that were very difficult to sit through, and there were personal exchanges that were hard. And so I don't want to say it was perfect. It wasn't that. We didn't always see each other the same way, but we came to some agreements about we were not going to play out our differences in front of the kids. We call them kids. We were not going to let those things then turn into political forces at odds with each other. So we might disagree at the table with each other. We might really struggle with some of the differences and choices we were making. But, at the end of the day, unless somebody was committing professional misconduct and they weren't, as one of my friends said to me, you let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Because you value staying together to do the next project, to do the next program, to work with the next set of kids, and hopefully personify a little bit better what collaboration is. And that means not backstabbing, not rumors, not, innuendos. That had to go away. And so sometimes that would happen, and we'd check each other about that. We try to hold ourselves to a better standard in those situations. And, I consider that a tremendous blessing and a lesson for later in my life then. Because Todd got me ready to be the department chairman, even though I sat that weekend and said, no way, that's not going to happen. And mentored me even during that period of time. And I came to him about, all my professional life at Fullerton College, Todd has been that for me. And if he hears I'm in trouble, then I get a phone call and he's having lunch with me. And he's grabbing me by the shoulders. He was very upset I postponed my retirement another year. He's upset with me. So I get a.
So that conversation's going to happen at your dinner. You talked about political statements and everything else, and I'm not saying that you did them for political reasons, but really when we look at some of the projects you did here, like the Laramie Project, which to me has a political statement, that you made sure it was involved because that was a national production because other people are doing it at the same time. You wrote a play. You did another play with Mark Breslin that had political overtones. I mean, you really did. Not only did you get to work here, but sometimes you got to use the department to satisfy your own artistic whims and means or make your statements. Is that true in saying those projects are part of that? I needed to say this, so therefore I did the project.
You have, when you're a full-time faculty member, you're one of the most blessed people in the world. I mean, you have privilege, and now retirement. I mean, a lot of my friends can't retire now, so there's a lot of privilege that comes with this. And in the selection of plays, there were a number of criteria that we would use, but one of them would be the passion of the person for the play they wanted to do. We didn't want to ask people to do plays they had no passion for. How would that translate to the students?
And the stage.
That it was a job only. And some people said to me, Bob, at some point, it's only going to be a job. And I said, when that happens, it's time for me to leave. So yeah, I think the passion, you identify with particular messages or stories and you want to do them, and hopefully they are, you trust in the material that it doesn't beat someone up, that it is open-ended enough, that it leads to dialogue about whatever that subject may be. And then realize, Mark, there is nothing I've done by myself. So every thread that one could follow in terms of projects or types of projects that had strong messages, there was a team of people. There were first people who brought it to me, the idea of it, whether it was Jim Breslin in April bringing to me, Jim Breslin, bringing to me Largo Desolado and saying Václav Havel is under house arrest in Czechoslovakia. We need to do something about this. And eventually, while we're doing the play, he becomes the president of Czechoslovakia. Extraordinary. And we have people from Penn International and Amnesty International in our theater celebrating that night and what it meant. So that came from the alumni, and they wanted to do something with us. My mother sent me the letters of Raoul Wallenberg at a time that I was thinking of writing a play about Leon Layson, the youngest Schindler's List survivor, and these letters resonated. And then my department let me do my play here. What playwrights get to do that? That was incredible privilege. And Laramie Project was done under the direction of other people. So Chuck Ketter had to be passionate about the first Laramie Project we did. And then an alum came to me and said, hey, there's this extraordinary thing underway. We're going to do readings worldwide, 150 theaters. Does Fullerton College want to be on this? And he asked me first. We were the first one on the website, the Tectonic Theater Works website, to do Laramie Project Epilogue 10 years later. Gosh, what a thrill that was. But that was because all these other people also shared in a passion for it. So I guess my simple answer is, yeah, if I was passionate about something, I wanted to do it. If I wasn't passionate, I wasn't going to get talked into doing the piece. even though our criteria was to try to have a balanced season over a 2 to 3 year period of time, so actors and designers and student directors working with us had a variety of genres and subject matter to experiment with.
You move on out of the theater department where you were very hands-on. You built sets, you directed, you did everything there, and then it's almost like a scientist asked, well, come on out of the lab because we really want to use your reputation now to sell the company on what we create. So they look at you and they say, Bob Jensen, we'd love to have you become Dean of Fine Arts, which takes you out of the theater building and come over here. And, you know, we all love you as the dean. There were some of us that sort of went, you know, I really can't. I know Bob's got a lot of drive. If he can kick it into everybody else, that's a great thing. But Bob, was there a reluctance of saying, I'll take this position because I become more of an administrator and a business person now? We know theater's business, and less of an artist? Or did you see the position as, ooh, this gives me more of an opportunity to take that artistic fingertip and put it here, there, and there?
I think the latter. I mean, I hope the latter. Yes, I recognized I was going to spend far too much time in meetings. I wasn't going to be directing and designing. I could still produce events, but I was going to be able to come up alongside really gifted people, still theater, but add to that art, digital arts, music recording, the commercial side of those programs as well. And I thought, well, first, I love all those disciplines. It goes all the way back to an earlier question about my parents taking me out to places and museums and theater venues and opera houses and everything else. I think I got to the point after 25 years in theater. It's not to say that I accomplished everything I needed to, but it was time for new voices in theater, new energy. And if I could take what I learned about theater into this job, when I came up alongside those people, I thought maybe I could help tell their story better, get them the financial support perhaps they didn't have, help them do some strategic planning like Todd Glenn taught me about, and see if the division could benefit from me. I didn't know that I was going to do it for 10 years. I wasn't sure what the arc was going to look like. And I mean, there was humility in being chosen. It wasn't easy to get the job. The president made me wait a while before she made her final decision, which means they weren't clear either, Mark, on whether I should be doing that. And that's okay. I made peace with that. But a couple things I did. I directed a play pretty early on that was a fundraiser having to do with 9/11. I wanted a remembrance of 9/11. I wanted to do a project. And then I continued to teach honors creative arts so that I could continue to teach, and that became evening time. And so I kept my fingers in as many places as I could, but it was hard. It was hard, and I'm not a numbers cruncher, and I needed to. I had to deal with personnel issues that I would have preferred not to, but you know, I was called to do that. Had to engage in things like denying people tenure or convincing people to leave, when contractually I can't pressure people to do those things. So instead it was more conversations about, are you happy here? Because you're bringing a tremendous amount of unhappiness into this world in which you teach, and why be unhappy coming to work each day? I mean, those kind of conversations. So there is a presumptuousness in being the supervisor at times, that you step in and have to not just listen to problems but do something about them. And sometimes I got that right and sometimes I didn't. A friend of mine who used to be a vice president here said, I'm so glad you got to be a teacher for 25 years before you became an administrator. I meet other people who are quick to administration, perhaps don't have as much experience in the classroom. Yes, they've had experience, and not to say they aren't good managers, but I'm probably not that effective an administrator because I still have the heart of a teacher. So there are things probably I don't do as well from an administrative standpoint, but I serve on a 1-year contract, and so I serve my leaders, and that means that at the end of the day I have to represent their message, and that's hard sometimes, you know. And not to say that they make mistakes, but I may disagree with it. I usually figure I have 2 chances. I'll get 1 no, I come back with a counter proposal, and when they say no the second time, then I need to move on. And so I had to make peace with that. So I actually think it was an extension of my theater experience, not a complete reinvention of myself. And then, I mean, the blessing, Mark, has been, oh my goodness, who have I met? In this capacity, hiring and evaluating full-time faculty, hiring and meeting adjunct faculty, seeing the body of work that they do professionally, serving with the advisory committees of all our vocational programs, which are working professionals in the entertainment industry. Oh my, I mean, the things that I've been learning. Even when I first began, I had an Apple representative named Jeff Monday, who's 25 years old, and I said, I would like to go to lunch with you once a month, and you teach me things I know nothing about, please. I mean, I have these young people in my life who teach me so much about the world of entertainment, how the shifting forces at work, the redefinition of entertainment careers. And I love the fact that all across fine arts at Fullerton College, the number one emphasis is teaching the fundamentals first, not mastering the software. And so to see the digital artists with their sketchbooks sketching, to see the musicians realizing how many hours they have to practice, to see the theater kids realizing I need a broad basis, foundational understanding of theater before I specialize. I love how well we do that. And so it's been heartwarming the last 10 years to see that. Yes, there have been some hard things I've had to work through, like budget cuts and giving up teaching, because I couldn't justify teaching myself, giving myself a teaching position when we were laying off people. But we've come out of that. And I inherited a robust fine arts division. It's not like I created it. And by no means have I done that. Instead, I've been their voice, their spokesman, hopefully their champion. And I've probably pissed off a few people as well, along the way, because I make the calls I have to make sometimes. And
I've got the list in my pocket.
yeah, I'm sure. I said to one person, you need to look at how thick your complaint folder is. I just want you to think about it as I'm leaving now. How thick your complaint folder is. What does that mean? Because we have these talks every semester. And the person said back to me, your folder is thicker, Bob. I said, really? Well, show it to me. I'm open to criticism. Where is it? It's right here. So I think there's probably a long list of things that would make me unpopular that have been part of being a dean. And that sort of goes with the territory. I flash back on the musical Wicked, the song Popular. I think we have to give that up. That's not really a good goal.
Yeah.
If the result is some people find you popular, I hope it's not at the cost of integrity and good values.
You talked about being the leader, the forefront on things you did. Of course, you were one of the main people here for the centennial at Fullerton College that put in. You talk about a lot of help. I mean, I know we came out from KBPK, Tracy Thackera, Corey, myself, we were all out there for that. Bob, I mean, when the centennial got dropped in your lap, and I don't know if it got dropped in your lap, but that's what it seemed like, because every place I saw something going on, you were there. I mean, did you look at this from that, this is another challenge I'm going to uphold and get through, or did you just sort of go, why me, or what was that like? Because it looked like you put in 10,000 hours for the centennial with a great deal of outside help and support from the community.
Well, I had suggested to Dr. Hodge that it was time for us to start planning for the centennial pretty early on in my deanship. And I think a lot of people looked at me like, there's more important things happening right now. There's the immediacy, there's the tyranny of the urgent all happening. And so I pressed quietly a couple times saying, what a tremendous outreach opportunity this is. Outreach to the community to tell our story, outreach to our alumni to bring them home, and talk with them and connect with them. What a great opportunity to deal with morale, because we were going through budget cuts. So that was the other thing. People said, why would we celebrate? My goodness, this is like the worst of times in California economy. And we're cutting and everything else. Why celebrate? And then the other, I just wanted the college to feel proudly a part of something larger than themselves, this legacy of 100 years of history. So I bought into it conceptually. From the very beginning, I was an advocate for it, but I was very surprised before Dr. Hodge left the college, she announced at a President's Advisory Council with me sitting across the room that I was now in charge of the centennial. And that Andrea Hanstein, the communications director, would be my partner. And we were both kind of stunned at that moment, and we embarked on a 5-year kind of planning and then execution of a plan. And we, to explain why scale went so large, part of it's I have no governor on myself, I guess, but I just thought, for me, this, because I had no expectations of being compensated for it. When you're dean, your manager's salary is your manager's salary. They don't want you going out looking for enterprise ways to pay yourself. I got that. But I just thought, boy, here could be potentially my gift back to the college for taking a risk on me in 1980. This guy that got hired, what were they thinking? Hiring me back then is probably what I thought at that time. And I thought, I believe in the concepts of these objectives, so why don't I live those in the next couple of years? And so we started some brainstorming sessions on campus. We brought people together. I went out and visited as many departments who would hear me. And what percolated up were a series of projects, because we said, we don't want to invent everything new here. Maybe you've got an existing event. Can we make it a centennial event? What would that look like? Would you like that? Would you want some funding to make that a little bit bigger, perhaps, than you normally are doing it? And can I partner you with some corporations or alumni who might like to stay in this relationship with you for the future? So it wasn't just a nostalgia tour looking back, but also could say, who can we be together for the future? I had an advisory group, steering group, and a 70-year-old alum said to me, it's great all these stories you're telling, Bob, all these projects we're thinking of, but who is Fullerton College going to be in the future? That should be the real question here. So it created a new sort of purpose, community and purpose again. Common theme was the purpose would be to dream a better future and a responsive to the forces of the future as best as we could do them. So many people stepped up and said, yeah, let's do this. And I went, oh my goodness, now I'm committed to what became 35 events and 31 projects. Some very small, some mega events. Thank you for being a part of them. You're right, so many people joined Andrea and me in these projects of all different kinds, and I loved every moment of it. I have to say that. Every moment, every event, every person I met, every moment I had with someone, hey, I got to tell you this story, or an email from Sweden. I saw the website. I have to tell you about this story when I was at Fullerton College in 1950 as a Swedish foreign exchange student or Norwegian, I can't remember exactly, or may I tell you about my grandfather? May I tell? And you experienced that, I think, at some of our events.
Yeah.
You got to interview people. So that accessing the stories, ultimately the highest value is to tell the story, because the human interest story is what people care about, not so much the history of the buildings, the programs, all those things. And when we landed on that, if you tell the story, then telling the story means you open a historical context to explore, and that context informs the listener, the reader, about what was happening in Orange County, California, the nation, the world in some cases. So trace the story, and all of a sudden, this person becomes remarkable. Not the college. The person is what's remarkable. Even if remarkable is in very seemingly ordinary terms, it is remarkable. That somebody overcame a set of obstacles, whether it was social injustice or fighting overseas, or dealing with significant illnesses or significant losses, and then what they did with their lives. And that, to me, then I hoped the stories were going to be inspiring stories for the current students now looking towards the future to say, gosh, Cruz Reynoso worked through the system and made changes happen. Leo Fender took his sense of invention in electronics and affected the world of entertainment in ways that he could never imagine in his little radio store in downtown Fullerton before it emerged into something much larger. So that's why the scale became so large, is so many people said, yeah, we'd like to do that. We'd like to join you. And I think I wore out my compatriots, and I'm sorry for that. I really am. It's hard to work with me at times. It is, probably a lot of the time. And I think I exhausted a lot of people. I think some people got tired of the centennial. Oh gosh, here he comes again. I never wanted it to be that. I just wanted it to be, what can we do to better connect us to our alums, our community, and to each other? And so that's why the events were never measured by how many people were there. It was sort of the quality of the community that came together for that particular event. And it was fun to see that have its own life that had nothing to do with me. To see the Scherbeck alumni surround Coach Scherbeck at his last visit to the campus before he died and tell him explicitly how much they loved him. that had nothing to do with me. That was them. And so whenever I saw those kind of moments, I just stepped back out of the way and was really thankful that the event created that kind of capital for each other.
And you talked about Hal Scherbeck. I think the thing that people need to realize about Robert Jensen is Dean of Fine Arts, worked in theater, but Bob, I've seen you walk across campus to other departments, extend a hand and say, hey, I hear you need to do this. I hear you want to do this. Maybe it's not going the way you want to. How can I lend a hand? I mean, you talked about Hal Scherbeck. You're over there making sure a statue for Hal is done correctly and is going to eventually be put out by the field, the old Hornet. So that's the other thing that I look at you and I've got to ask you. You put in all these hours to the fine arts department, all these hours you give to the theater, and yet you still have enough time to reach across campus. I mean, as a dean, shouldn't you have your own little protective area and take care of it? Why do you stick the hand out to everybody else and say, hey, if you need some help, call Bob Jensen? You've already talked about stretching yourself. Is it the love for the college, or is it just you in general are that sort of person?
No, that's a hard question. It's a good question, I guess. What makes Bob run probably is a question that my therapist might answer better. I haven't seen a therapist in a while, but I work through why do I keep adding things? And I said before, I probably don't have enough of a governor on myself. I met with one dean about the centennial. I had a whiteboard loaded with projects. I was asking him whether his division would like to be engaged in some of these activities. He turned to me and said, are all of us supposed to be doing this? And I know we are weary, but see, I was looking at my end game. I was looking at my, I admire Scott McKenzie so much. He's an ultra marathoner. This centennial was my ultra marathon, not with the same pain that he experiences out in the desert running, as he's done so well for so long. But, I could see the finish line. And so I could pump myself into some things, perhaps that were a little bit beyond what the expectations were. My colleagues on the Dean's Council are first rate. They are very busy themselves in ways that we don't see. I may be more seen because I'm involved in public events, but that doesn't mean they're not working very hard in their areas. I've enjoyed the last 10 years on Dean's Council because we have mutual respect for each other. We stay out of each other's business. We reach out and collaborate where it's appropriate. But I'm the one that gets to do the more public things, and they're more quiet heroes doing a lot of extraordinary things themselves. So I think when I reach out to the departments, it's probably because I love people. People are infinitely fascinating. Mm-hmm. They told me in college I got to be a college officer at times because I knew more people than other people. That's just because I love people. So when I go out to these departments, it's just building on some friendships or making some new friendships.
You look at it, and I know you never did any of this, so somebody would come and pat you on the back and say, Bob, let me tell you how wonderful you are. But you have been lucky enough to be honored by so many people along the way. So it's really sticking a real difficult situation here. Out of all the things where somebody has come and pat you on the back and said, thank you for doing this, if I had to say to you, Bob Jensen, to get through the pearly gates, you have to tell me what's your most prized moment when somebody patted you on the back for doing things with. What would you say to me? Mark, I did. This is what I am the proudest of.
I would have to say my 3 children is the proudest accomplishment, and it's a team effort because it's Sandy's family, and I love my children. I have a great relationship with them. They're concerned about me. The talks I have with them are a different version of a Todd Glenn talk. I play men's softball because Garrett permits me to, and because he wants me to stay in shape. And
your hip lets you play.
All the different parts of my body that, I was late for this interview because I was at physical therapy. So the proudest accomplishment is family, and I take no single credit for it. But Sandy and I have tried to be the kind of parents that we learned by example, seeing in others, and so that's a tremendous thrill in my life. And now to have grandchildren, just that family is so rich. The fabric, grows in ways that are wonderfully surprising. So Garrett does softball with me. Clay does cornhole tournaments with me on Monday night. Was our last tournament. I love to hang out in their worlds and their friends. And Caitlin is this wonderfully sensitive artist who, she and her husband Brian are young and in love, and it's so inspiring to see them. They live downtown Fullerton in an apartment. She works downtown. Brian's starting a teaching career. And those are the proudest accomplishments. I could list things at work, but my fear would be I would miss some things.
Mm-hmm.
I think the best moments are the quiet moments. To know that Vicki and Charles Dodson, after Bronwyn died, used to come late at night with a thermos of wine and toast Bronwyn, sitting outside the theater in the middle of the night, very quietly, not trying to interfere with the college at all, to remember her. So that project, was significant. You've mentioned the centennial, all the friendships I now have from that. That's priceless. And I think the young faculty, I'm going to have a party in June for all the young faculty in fine arts before I go, where I want them to feel what I felt with Tom, Todd, Gary, this sense of opportunity. I want them to just be so excited about what's ahead, and then if they take interest in each other across the departments, just not in a department, and then across the campus of what could be in front of them. Because I'm proud, I didn't do it by myself. There were committees, obviously, and subject matter experts going through all these different hiring committees that we've done. There's some really promising, very promising people that are here now who love to teach and have one foot in the industry. I mean, that's the best promise for Fullerton College, that and a new performing arts center that will be built over the next 20 years of construction, a massive plan. Those two things, feel very good. Been lobbying that for a long time. I don't take credit for the Performing Arts Center, and I'm a little heartsick that I won't get to work on it, but maybe I can raise some money for it. We'll see what role I may get to play in that. I may just be the guy in the walker asking where he is. I don't know what's going to happen when it's done.
Bob Jensen, I knew him once. Oh, no, that's me. Because that's what I was going to ask you next. It's been a great journey.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Personally, career-wise, you look back and you say, what about, like you said, you get to be our age and you start looking back and thinking of the memories and the people you knew and wondering if you made the right turns, everything. So you're getting ready to walk out the door, and Fullerton's at a certain point. You, Bob, Gary, and Tom had a 10-year plan. If you could walk out of Fullerton tomorrow and people would listen to you, where would you like to see this college in 10 years?
Excellent question. And so I'm trying to filter this from just those things that I'm most passionate about. I think one thing that we're lacking, and so I'll talk about missed opportunities.
Okay.
There's a lot of good things that are happening here, and so I'm not beating up the college. I'm saying these are some opportunities that I wish I desire to be cultivated. So my first is a question: how can a 100-year-old institution not have a development office? The universities have them. Some of the best community colleges have them. We have a foundation that does wonderful work with scholarships. I serve on their board. Tonight we're going to have our scholarship banquet. Those stories of the kids that are helped that way are wonderful. But we don't have a capital fundraising arm of the college. And so I would ask in my 10-year plan that a development office be created, that we hire professional people to cultivate the relationships with alumni and corporations, the private donors, in addition to the grant writing. But the grants are a really small part of capital fundraising, especially with the new buildings coming. Would be great naming right possibilities if one wishes. But development doesn't just mean alumni and friends writing checks. It means interaction with those alums, those corporations, to say, who do you want us to be in the future? How can we serve you better? What can we do, not just the telling of the stories, but what can we do to serve you, your families, etc., in the future? So I think a development office, the Hall of Fame that you got to attend, that's a logical thing for a development office to do in the future. I'm fearful that we're not going to have another one. I hope we do.
Mm-hmm.
I hope some people step up and say, I'd like to be responsible for that. Let's move in this direction. So that would be one thing. Two is that my great hope is we don't run out of money for these performing arts facilities. The things we're talking about that I hope continue to be in the conversation, of building a world-class performing arts complex. So proscenium stage, black box theater, concert hall, recital hall, sound stage, recording studios, radio station, television studios, conference rooms, digital media labs, all funneling into the complex of this cross-disciplinary excitement, and then dance coming to fine arts. I hope we don't run out of money. I hope people don't make this that thing that we need to cut down, because we are so well positioned. All over the state we are told that we are not me, but we are the leading fine arts division in the state. Now, I've asked superiors, tell me about better programs. They say, don't you get it? This is the best program. So why doesn't the best program with the greatest potential for serving our students have the best facilities?
I agree.
And we've bought the equipment. We have it. We'll supplement that equipment. And that south side of Chapman, once we tear down the 2000 building, imagine that bare canvas of what could be created. And imagine what it will feel like to drive by those facilities and look at something different. Doesn't mean it will look like Frank Gehry dropped a helicopter of a building there, as exciting as that would be. It will still have an homage to the other architecture here. But the glass openings and the bridge that bridge will be a metaphor not just to the crazy people across the street. It'll be the bridge, the metaphor of the future,
right,
and all that means in the wonderful changes that are in the entertainment industry. So that would be my second wish, is that Performing Arts Center really not be compromised from what it could be. Our former chancellor said we should create a music conservatory. That may not be a realistic idea, because those are professional training programs, and we're going to create a conservatory to transfer people to other conservatory. Well, it's about $100 million to create a music conservatory here if we're going to do it. It's a 4-year program. We don't have those permissions. But the fact that he was interested in that means they saw quality in this music program. The art program has outgrown its space completely. It is full all the time. There's 2,500 fine arts majors. How many schools have that many fine arts majors?
Yeah.
Universities do. So serving that, is the third part of this, is that the programs be dynamic in the arts. Dynamic meaning changing, and the mechanisms for that. We have a new training agreement with the Walt Disney Company and Disneyland, training the wizards who work backstage. In addition to, we're brokering a conversation about having a formal training arrangement for sound engineers, audio engineers, theater technicians, so both blue shirts and black shirts at the park.
Nice.
So we want to keep making the curriculum dynamic. I just wrote 6 classes that I couldn't pass. I had experts help me with it.
Right.
I put them in the curriculum. Steve Pliska's taking over on them. There's stuff I would love to take about programmable logic computers and some of the advanced networking that is a part of show control and that side of the entertainment industry. So, gosh, I'm only on number 3, and you wanted more of these for the 10-year
Well, I was looking
plan?
for 10-year. I figured we just help out the next dean that steps in line, and he can
Well, I
watch the
think
end
that-
of the interview.
I would say continue to define the curriculum in a way that will attract students too. It's not just the end point. But we've got to understand where the kids are coming from, socioeconomic background, what arts training have they had, who are they when they come to Fullerton College. I encourage my faculty, give them writing samples in the first week, find out who they are, what are their stories, and in the writing sample you may discover some things about deficiencies that you can get them some tutoring at the first onset of the semester, and not a couple weeks in when you get the first essay from them. And so I think we really want to be responsive. And a lot of people talk about student success. That's the buzzword of higher education. We've been doing student success for a long time, whether it's had that label or not. And so that means, here's the next issue for me for the future, is that we invest a great deal of time in faculty advisement, and that we train our faculty well enough. It's not to take the place of the counselors, it's to be complementary to what the counselors are helping them in transferring information. But our subject matter experts know the schools to which they're transferring. They have friendships and agreements with those particular schools. And we have the employers on our advisory committees. So, the better the faculty advisement. I love that theme from the Centennial. Don Carlson said it, that people saw things in him, his teachers saw things in him before he saw them. You want to be that kind of a teacher. I think the other thing is not to isolate themselves on campus. When Dr. Scheller was president here many, many years ago in the 60s, he insisted that you lived in the city of Fullerton. Well, that's not practical anymore. You had to wear a jacket and tie. I did for my interview today. And third, you had to belong to a service organization in town. What's that all about? That's about being engaged in the life of the college. That's what he was insisting on. Mm-hmm. And so I want to ask, the faculty of the future here, the staff of the future, to invest in the college. And no matter where you live, that you're engaged in the life of the college, because then as you bring the students to the art gallery, to the science fair, to the debate contests, and all those things, like to the sporting events, then it's richer because you know something more about your colleagues. People lament the fact that we don't have a staff dining room that people participate in anymore. That was a meeting of the minds lunches that went on for years and years here. And there used to be more family events on campus. So I hope our next president will try to build that sort of fabric of connection. We can't call it family because we have our own families, but mm-hmm. It can be family-like, which means you look out for each other. I mean, Sandy and I have been reading books about neighboring and being more intentional in our neighborhood. Instead of being upset about the neighbor who doesn't mow his lawn, what's the backstory? What's going on in the family? Mm-hmm. And to whatever extent they want you involved, what can you do to help them? Doesn't mean just mowing their lawn. Maybe you find out dad has cancer, so what are the real things you could help with? So the same thing on campus. Somebody has a bad day, well, you sort of excuse that because you know more about these people. You take an interest in them. Or more importantly, for the future, is you collaborate with them on a project because your students benefit from what that's going to be. So that's not the full list, but I think a development office, a focus on these new facilities being really 21st century, all the right reasons, hiring faculty that really care, an engagement in the life of the college, and then really importantly, understanding the students, where they're coming, and not lower the standards, just hold them to the high standards and help them get there. Don't tolerate mediocrity, Mm-hmm. Don't let them live in a culture of mediocrity. Don't let them live in a culture of excuses. But be compassionate enough to know how hard it was to come to school that day for all the things that are in their lives at that point.
Well, I'm going to bring my Kentucky cycle of this interview to an end. That's not going to go 6.5 hours. But Bob, I'm going to let you just sort of sum it up. You look at the journey, step outside and take a look at Bob Jensen, and go ahead and sum it up for me. The journey for you has been what for these 30 plus years? As you look back, how would you paint it, or how would you describe the journey? And I think that's the best way to say this has been a great interview.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thanks for you and Ethan doing the interview today. I really appreciate it. It's been 35 years of privilege and opportunity and friendship, really. And that trumps achievement, accomplishment, the friendships. And so that's, which puts me in a place of holding back tears because it's emotional for me, those kind of friendships. I mentioned it earlier, but I think it's about community and purpose. And so I've been blessed to be a part of a family community with purpose, a faith-based community of purpose, a theater department with purpose, the Dean's Council, the college, the alumni, all these intersecting circles of community and purpose. And so I'm extremely hopeful. I've always been hopeful. I'm probably seen as a inveterate optimist, but I am just so optimistic. I believe in the human potential. I believe some deep things in my faith that give me a reservoir of strength that I draw from at all times. But it's been a time of great privilege. It's been a wild, crazy ride, but I've always turned around and someone's been beside me, and I've always been aware that the Lord, is behind me as well. So that's what I would say. I've had a tremendous 35 years. I'm deeply grateful for it, and just like our friendship, I'm very grateful for Mark. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for our friendship and everything you've done for me, and for people that have never had the opportunity to meet Bob. You should do that, and if you ever have the opportunity to work with Bob, the best way to describe you, I know your kids, I watched them grow up, I've met your wife. He is a wonderful gentleman. He is a fantastic father. He is a great husband, because you'd have to be for Sandy to stick around for all these years. And he's one heck of a friend, one of the nicest men you'd ever want to meet. And it's somebody that I walk on campus that every time I have an opportunity, and I've seen you walk by the radio station, I've had to jump out the door and say, Bob, how you're doing? I just want to thank you. It's been an honor to be able to call you friend for all these years. I love you as a person. I respect you for what you do. And I thank you for everything you gave my people that when we went to school here and all the other people. Bob, thank you for what you've given us. And we hope we've given back to you as much as you gave to us. It's been an honor knowing you all these years, and I wish you nothing but love, success, and happiness for the rest of your life. It's, again, Fullerton's going to miss a really wonderful man when you walk away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark.
Bob Jensen, fine art dean, going to retire here from Fullerton College, and we'll see what happens. This is Bob Jensen. I'm Mark Pavlovich. Ethan Morris on 90.1 FM KBPK.